Ohio's bribery scandal claims another life. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. For the second time, a key player in Ohio's bribery scandal has died by suicide. Police found Sam Randazzo's body Tuesday in Columbus. The coroner's office says it was an apparent suicide. His death comes about 3 years after lobbyist Neil Clark took his own life. Both were indicted for their roles in the $60 million House Bill 6 bribery scheme that helped Larry Householder become House Speaker and then lead to the bailout of 2 nuclear energy plants in northern Ohio owned by FirstEnergy. Randazzo, the former chair of the state's Public Utilities Commission, was accused of accepting a nearly $4.5 million bribe from FirstEnergy. 2 executives charged in that case have pleaded not guilty, and their cases are pending. Mike Miller, what does the death of Sam Randazzo do to the case and the investigation?
I think it does very little, Mike. The 2 people that were recently indicted from FirstEnergy by the Attorney General's office, I saw some comment about, well, it'll be tougher to get them because they can blame it all on Sam and not there to defend himself. But I don't think that's the case. I think the government will not have any problem proceeding. Whether they win or not, it's a horse of another color. And the same thing with the federal government. I don't think what they have left, or maybe to come even, is going to be affected by Sam's unfortunate death.
Does it make guilty pleas more or less likely as we get closer to trial, both state and federal levels?
I don't think so. I don't think it has any effect on that one way or the other.
Randazzo's assets is also in question. They were millions of dollars in assets frozen with the hope of being seized, Jeremy, but that's up in the air. We don't really know what's going to happen there.
Right, it's too soon to say what's going to happen. These are state-level indictments against Randazzo. It looks like there were going to be no federal indictments, but Attorney General Dave Yost has been seeking for a couple of years now to get those assets, in part because the lawsuit wants him to pay damages for the millions of bribes that he's accused of taking from FirstEnergy as the state's top utility regulator to basically do FirstEnergy's bidding while he was in that position.
It's regardless of what you think about what Sam Randazzo was accused of doing and what you thought of him personally, it's still a tragedy when someone dies unexpectedly, someone dies by apparent suicide.
It is. It is a tragedy. And, the thing that I think a lot of people are wanting is answers. People want to know the real truth about some of the stuff that's starting to come out, that's been coming out for years. And Sam Randazzo probably had a lot of those answers, but now we'll never know that.
But it's also a part of what I call a tapestry of power and crime. When people get at that level, the different things that they do, we've had 2 people commit suicide, and we've had 2 more coming up. We have 1 in jail, all over greed and power. Greed is the money, but power is their ability to do this.
Mike, you've seen this, I'm sure, many times in your career as a prosecutor, as an attorney. Successful people who their lives have fallen apart. Either they've gone to jail, they've lost their careers. In this case, people have now died over money, over what you've seen it over and over again. What is the underlying theme behind all of these cases?
Well, I'm not sure there is any one answer to that, Mike. There's no thread that goes through every person's life that has ended it through a suicide. Money, certainly, and I think the shame of being charged with these offenses and the strain not only on yourself, but what it puts through the family to pick up the paper every day and read about your husband, your father, or what. And it's never complimentary. It's always an innuendo. They're guilty and so forth. It's there. Other people have perhaps reasons we're more familiar with, depression and so. But it's hard to explain, but I just think everybody's a little bit different. Sam's case, I knew him very slightly. He actually worked at the law firm that I'm with when I first started 27 years ago, but was gone within a few months, so I never really knew him. And I would just think that the strain for the family became just unbearable, and he thought that's the best way out for them.
Jeremy, the attorney for Sam Randazzo, claims that Yost's persecution was was too aggressive, too rigorous, too much stuff was coming out. We talked about the memes last week on this show. The show Randazzo dressed as a superhero and the text that came out. But that was all part of the case. Was it appropriate to release those stuff ahead of the trial?
Well, I didn't see anything that Randazzo's attorney released as evidence that that was a factor in Randazzo's decision to take his own life. It could have been. We don't know. So for him to ascribe a motive like that, saying, well, the media and the prosecutors persecuted him, and to suggest that they were at least in part responsible for his death, well, if there's evidence of that, I'd like to see it.
But the pressure was building on him. He was looking at long time in prison anyway, and he was an older guy, not the best of health, apparently, according to his attorney.
Right, and his assets had been frozen, and that was a big thing too. I mean, I can imagine that if your assets are frozen, you're probably freezing the assets with the wife too, and it might be, funds that are commingled. And can you imagine what would happen to your family's budget if every account that you had, joint names on was frozen? That might be hard.
In your experience, what happens to assets before a case is resolved if a person dies?
Mike, I really don't have that experience, that type of thing. It's more of a civil litigation than what I'm used to. So I really don't know. I did see in this matter that some of this the federal stuff, when they had tried to seize certain things, ended with death. I didn't quite understand that, but apparently that's not the same in the state. So I'm not sure what will happen. Eventually, I'm sure that all the parties will reach some reasonable settlement in this.
But Mike, one of the things he said I think is important. This is a political figure, but he's a family member, he's a friend. And if you've been on the inside of a divorce, ooh, that's close, on suicide, and I have, friend, daughter of a friend, man, that's not a short-term thing. That lasts a long time.
Yeah. There is another development in this investigation. It came out this week in documents that were provided by FirstEnergy that they had sent $1 million to what they noted was the Jon Husted campaign when he was running for governor before he became a candidate for lieutenant governor. The money was apparently sent to a political PAC, Jeremy, that then was not affiliated with Husted but had given money to Husted. So what's going on there?
Right. It was given to a 501c4 called Freedom Frontier, and it's a shadowy group. My colleague Andrew Tobias tried to look into this group in 2018 and looked at their tax filing, called the name on the tax filing, and it was a woman in Texas who said, hey, how did my name end up on this tax filing? I don't know. And so these are a number of dark money groups that it's impossible or almost impossible to trace who is actually behind this. And this was a group that even back in 2018 was considered to be pro-Husted and then pro-DeWine, Governor Mike DeWine. And now we don't know a whole lot more about this group than we did back in 2018.
Yeah. But the Husted's office and the governor's office says FirstEnergy did not give to his campaign, the Husted's campaign, and they're not affiliated with this group. Doesn't mean they didn't take money from this group, though,
That's
Joe.
right. Yeah.
All right. Let's get to our next topic. According to state law and the political calendar, President Biden will not be on the Ohio ballot running for U.S. president. The reason why is because the Democrats are likely to nominate Biden in their convention in late August, but the problem is the convention comes after the deadline for his name to be put on the Ohio ballot. Secretary of State Frank LaRoe's office has sent Democratic Party leaders a letter to warn them of the situation. The GOP convention happens before that deadline, so Donald Trump would be okay. And this has happened before for both parties, and state lawmakers extended the deadline with little controversy. But this time, Senate President Matt Huffman says this is a problem for Democrats to solve. Sam Gresham, a lot of finger pointing at Frank LaRoe's and his office for this sort of late warning. But where were the Democrats? This thing was settled a year ago. This convention date was settled a year ago. Did they forget that the deadline and the convention nomination was?
Everybody knew the truth. And we just need a little drama and theater now, performance to perk it up a little bit. And we'll sit down and cut a deal. I don't know what everybody wants, but it'll happen because the retort in the meeting about this thing is that it will happen to you one year and see what we do for you. Okay, no, it'll go away. The drama is beautiful, though. Isn't politics about theater?
So, Joe, what is this? I mean, Huffman's saying, what? Huffman said this is a Democratic problem to solve, but they can't solve it legislatively without Republican help.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the Democrats are in the very, very few in the legislature. They're so outnumbered. I think the Democrats in the legislature, if you talk to them, they're saying this will get solved. We're not going to, you know, talk about this right now. And they're just kind of moving that discussion to the nationals. But, you know, here's the other thing, Mike. There may be a redistricting issue on the ballot in November. And if one party is keeping another party's presidential candidate off the ballot by not doing something to get them there, how does that play with voters who are considering redistricting?
Yeah. What do you think happens here, Jeremy?
Well, I think right now we've gotten every indication from legislative Democrats that they're looking to the National Democratic Party to make a decision on what to do here. My prediction is going to be that instead of even trying for a legislative fix, they're going to have some sort of mini convention, like a Zoom call, where they technically meet the requirements of Ohio law and move forward. If for some reason Biden doesn't make the ballot in Ohio, the real loser here is Sherrod Brown. Biden was probably going to lose Ohio anyway, if he's on the ballot or not. But Sherrod Brown, you know, he's in one of the most competitive and most watched Senate races in the country. And if there's not a marquee headliner event, that's going to hurt him.
Mike, we just came through the debate over Colorado and Maine, trying to keep Trump off the ballot. Does this not blow back on Republicans if they keep Joe Biden off the ballot on a technicality in Ohio?
Well, I think absolutely, Mike. I think the Republicans will be making a grave error. Hopefully what Jeremy says works out, something of that nature to remove it. And frankly, the way politics is anymore, if I were the Democrats to rely on the Republicans doing what I think all of us think is the right thing, I'm not sure I would trust the legislature to do that. But, you know, we're such split country anyway, and here's an election that whoever wins, if the polls are anywhere close, it's going to be a relatively close election. Any can decide it. And to have somebody off one of the major states in this country on something like this, I think would hurt Republicans all over the country.
Why not just say, if you're the Senate president, you know what, Joe Biden's name should be on the ballot, and he's going to lose badly to Donald Trump. Wouldn't that just be as politically effective? I don't know.
But that's common sense, Mike.
Have you met the legislature?
I know, I'm just saying.
I mean, you know, in our legislature right now, if a Republican is reaching across the aisle, that's a sign of weakness to a lot of folks there.
I'm sorry about that.
So, courts, are the courts a possible solution here? Can the courts say, I mean, the law is the law. So
what law have they violated?
I mean, there might be a federal law, the Electoral College law or something like that.
They sort of argued that in, I can't remember if it was a Colorado case or not, that the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court ruled that, you know, to affect these elections, this is a state thing, you can't do it that way. And they might be able to stretch this thing in Ohio the same way, the federal courts. But hopefully, all of that will be avoided.
Yeah. You don't think if Biden's not on the ballot, it might jazz up Democrats to vote for Sherrod Brown and vote for redistricting, as Joe said?
I don't know.
It's uncharted territory.
It's never
we
happened
just don't
before.
know. Yeah.
If it happens,
a lot of angry Democrats.
There would be.
A lot of angry Democrats.
Well, Governor DeWine has had a hard time getting bold initiatives through the legislature. That's despite the governor's party controlling the legislature. So in this year's State of the State address, Governor DeWine did not call for modest gun control or special authority to manage a public health emergency. He tried to win over stubborn Republican lawmakers by focusing on the children.
The single most important thing we can do for Ohio's future is to ensure that all Ohio children, no matter where they live, no matter who their parents are, have the opportunity to live up to their full God-given potential. And if they have the chance to pursue their dreams and their passions in life, it's the most important thing we can do. Kids have only one chance to grow up, so we must have a great sense of urgency, as every moment we waste is a moment that they lose.
DeWine called for more health care for new mothers. He announced plans to expand child care facilities and make them more affordable. He'll form a strike force to help kids get eyeglasses, and he wants schools to use phonics to teach kids how to read. Joe Ingles, can we get cohesion and collaboration over children at the Statehouse?
It depends. You know, if they go up against tax cuts, I don't know. We'll see. But immediately the Democrats came out and they said, well, you don't have a problem with the expanding child care. They've wanted that. And, some of these ideas are okay with the Democrats, but as we established, the Democrats are in the minority. And if they go up against, seriously, something like tax cuts in the budget, we'll have to see where that lands.
Sam, these are progressive ideas he has here. Maybe not the science of reading stuff, but the other stuff is pretty progressive.
It's very progressive. I like the vision program that he talked about. I also like the idea, but it's an old idea, connecting school to work and having a real relationship to school and work. I think you're right. The political atmosphere for him didn't allow him to be daring this year. It didn't allow him to really, in my opinion, express what he really feels because of the political politics in his past years when he told them what he really, really thought.
Mike, were you hoping for more bold things from the governor? I don't know what it would have been, education funding reform, or maybe a compromise on the abortion issue that wasn't what voters approved for, a different amendment.
No, not particularly, Mike. I think what he said was very good, and I don't know who can disagree with trying to help children and so forth, both sides. But, he did a couple other things like wanting to have, I think, a statewide ban on vaping and a statewide ban on whatever the other.
CBD and marijuana-related products.
And apparently the Senate and House chairmen have already come out and said, we don't think that's a very good idea. Now, maybe he expected opposition, so he threw that out, let them torpedo that and pass everything else. I don't know.
If you look at the structure of the speech, Jeremy, that was sort of at the end. He led all this stuff about the kids and the eyeglasses and the child care and the health care. Mm-hmm. And by the way, let's nix the CBD stuff at the local gas station.
Yeah, don't forget I want this stuff at the end. Before I go, let me renew my request.
Will those things pass in some form? I mean, how can you be opposed to recreational marijuana but it be against a ban on CBD products in convenience stores?
Well, it's wrapped up in the larger marijuana debate about what, if anything, to do about the state's new marijuana law. Mm-hmm. And it's really been the House of Representatives under Speaker Jason Stephens who has resisted making changes right away. And it looks like right now they're not going to make any legislative changes before administrative rules come out in September or so that allow, among other things, to issue licenses to start selling marijuana. So what lawmakers have said is many of those changes, if not most of them, will come via those rules instead of legislative fixes.
Joe, it seems like some of the things he's proposed here, he doesn't need the legislature. He can just do this on his own using federal grants and things like that. So
Sure, and some of the things he's talking about, he's already kind of implemented some stages ahead of time to get those things off the ground. If you look at like vision, for example, he's done some things already in that realm. So this is merely more of an expansion. Yeah,
there are 11 counties where they have health professionals visiting brand new moms, like in the couple of weeks after birth, which is, we don't know how it's working out yet, but that's already happening. He wants to expand that.
Well, one of the things that bothers me, and I think he could have been a bit more constructive, we just went through a pandemic, and nobody is talking about changing the health care system at all as a result of that pandemic, because there were a lot of deficiencies and holes that we saw in that system. Amnesia just goes away. I mean, people just are not thinking. There will be another pandemic. There will be another plague. There will be another problem. And people are going to have to count on this healthcare system. Governor, if you're listening to me, let's work on the healthcare system so that so many people don't die next time.
But expanding the authority and the resources for public health after what we saw with Amy Acton is probably not going to happen, right?
Probably not, especially in an election year when you have the entire House of Representatives, half the Senate up for election. The last thing I think that many of them want to do is pass laws to expand marijuana use and expand government-run healthcare, in their words.
They do want to, the governor did suggest that we make the penalty tougher for not wearing your seatbelt. Yeah. I mean, how many
Okay,
people
good
don't
luck.
wear their seatbelt these days? I mean, seriously?
Well, I think the thing is, right now, if you get pulled over for something else, you know, then you don't have your seatbelt on, they can cite you. Most people, if you look at the studies, most people do wear their seatbelts. But this is something that the Ohio legislature has been very reluctant to act on. They don't like a primary seatbelt law. I don't think just because the governor said, I'd like to have one, that they're going to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, Governor, we'll give you that.
There is a law you have to have children wearing a seatbelt, right?
Yes, children have
So
to be restrained,
there you go.
yes.
And hopefully you have enough sense to do that.
Yes.
That's not a war that you're rebelling against putting children in seatbelts, are you?
But seatbelts were in the State of the State address this year. That shows the state of the state legislature. Anyway, Norfolk Southern Railroad has agreed to pay $600 million to people affected by last year's fiery train derailment in East Palestine. The award would settle a class action lawsuit filed by some residents and business owners in the eastern Ohio community. The derailment and fire sent toxic chemicals into the air and nearby waterways. The money could pay for health care needs, property restoration, and make up for lost business because of the derailment. Jerry Pelzer, the big question is $600 million enough? This could affect tens of thousands of people.
I think if you talk to a lot of people, especially in East Palestine, they would say absolutely not. But as you know, a lot of people need that money now. A lot of people can't afford to have a years-long court battle over this, and they're losing their businesses. Their homes are decreasing in value. You need money, and this will give them some of that money. I mean, this isn't the end of the story. There's other lawsuits. Not everyone is participating in this lawsuit, too. So this is just the beginning instead of the end.
So, surprised by the speed. It's only been a little more than a year since the derailment, Mike, but the speed at which this was negotiated and agreed to?
Yeah, I am somewhat. I mean, it's so complex and so many people. It's happened rather quickly. There's still other monies to come and allocated in other ways, apparently. But, you know, as Jeremy said, the people, if they're offered, and I make up a number, I don't know what it'll be, but here's your share is $25,000 out of the $600 million. They can say no, and then they can sue on their own behalf, and of course it costs them money and so forth. But my guess is that because of the attorneys involved in all this, representing factions of the East Palestine people, that they seem to be fairly happy with it. So my guess is a high percentage will accept it. I don't know what it will be, 80, 90, 92, something like that, and then the other ones will move on and fight it.
It's not going to be divided evenly. Apparently, according to the settlement,
Right.
if you're like really close and had serious health effects, you would get more. If your business was shut down for a month and another business was shut down for a few days, that business would get more, Joe. And
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of interesting is there's not a lot of strings attached to how you use this money. So that's going to make it more palatable to someone who is considering, hey, do I go ahead and take this settlement or do I go ahead and sue? They, you know, they see the chance of using that money for something they really need where it couldn't be covered otherwise. They might jump at it.
Aaron Brockovich, the activist, environmentalist, fights against contamination, the after effects, says the money itself is not enough. Norfolk Southern should have to detail what happened and what they're going to do from it happening again. Sam, do you agree with her?
Yeah, I agree with her. I think these train wrecks come and go, but the residue of what they've done to communities, whether psychologically, physically, economically, are still there. I read, given attorney's fees, it would be about $6,000 a person who would get that money.
If they give it equal amount to all.
Equally, yeah. And the other caveat is Joe put that makes it attractive. They can use it for anything they want. They can use it to go buy another house someplace else. So there's an attraction to this money immediately that people can use it.
Yeah, bird in the hand. Anyway, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike Miller up first.
Well, we've talked about, the huge problem with FirstEnergy. And as Sam said, we now have 2 deaths. We have 2 people in prison, one of whom, if you believe in an actuary table, is probably going to die in prison. And yet, the way I've seen publicly anyway, I don't see what's happened to the FirstEnergy people who, according to the government, made statements they bribed these people before May or whatever it was. And I would hope that if that's the occasion, I'm not passing guilt or innocence myself because I don't know the facts, but if it is, I hope we see those people doing some serious time in prison also.
Okay, Sam.
That's not going to happen, Mike. I agree with you. The way crime works in this country, and particularly for politicians. I've heard some people say Trump is not going to get any time. Oh my God! But what I want to say to the people who are listening to us out there is, come fall, we have the redistricting commission on the ballot, and we're going to look for support because you can change Ohio by using that commission.
Okay, Jeremy.
I'm going to make a prediction. I think despite the news of Jon Husted and this $1 million payment to the Husted campaign, it's not going to be as big an issue in the 2026 governor's race as perhaps right now it might seem. I think there's going to be bigger issues, including who's in the White House.
Okay, Joe.
And I just want to say something completely different. Last year, we saw a lot of community pools across the state closing because there weren't enough lifeguards. This is the time right now where cities, communities can think about training students, young people, to be lifeguards and have enough for the summer.
All right. That'll do it for this week's edition of Columbus on the Record. Continue the conversation online. We're on Facebook. Also, you can watch us on your time at our website, WOSU.org, YouTube, and the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.